The Declaration of the United Lodge of Theosophists says that the policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Next, we'll do a quick review of the 3 fundamental propositions of theosophy. These appear in the Secret Doctrine at the top of page 14, and we find these fundamentals propositions all work together as one. And they apply to nature's laws as presented in the Secret Doctrine. The first fundamental is on deity and explains the unity of all existence, the rootless root of all that was, that is, or ever shall be. It extends beyond the range of human comprehension and can only be dwarfed by any human expression. Therefore, it has been called beingness rather than being, and is thought of as the great breath, the one reality. It is the dynamic energy that might be linked to that small voice that wells up within every individual soul, that consciousness that should be our guide. Spirit, matter, soul, life, embodied and unembodied. What people generally call God or deity is an aspect of life, this omnipresent principle which invisibly functions in the atom as in the cosmos, and which abides as the self in the heart of every creature. Another aspect of life is law. People speak of the laws of God, the laws of nature, but it would be more accurate to speak of God as law. God, life, self are not different from law, they are law. The spirit of the universe also surrounds and is within all. We, eternal pilgrims, have the opportunity to become gods or one with the absolute through sustained effort. We honor the gods as superior beings to emulate, but not as beings outside of ourselves. The second fundamental is on the law that brings out an analogy between the processes of nature in the cosmos and in the individual man. We can see this law in terms of cycles and periodicity, day and night, life and death, sleeping and waking. Man's lower principles disintegrate in time, and nature uses them again with their various imprints from the past to form new human principles. And the same process takes place in disintegration and formation of worlds. There is a perpetual exchange of atoms, correlating and changing their combining equivalents like the perfect flower dying in order to grow into a perfect fruit. Man himself punishes and rewards based on his deeds. As above, so it is below. So the second fundamental proposition is law or cycles. The third is on evolution and demonstrates consciousness. The whole order of nature is progressively marching toward a higher life in the cycle of incarnation. No spiritual divine soul or buddhi can have an independent conscious existence before the spark from its essence has passed through every elemental form and has acquired individuality. First by natural impulse, from the mineral and plant and animal up to the human stage. Thereafter, we progress by self-induced and self-devised effort, checked by our karma. And it's possible to attain a higher state, that of the holiest archangel, a Dhyani Buddha. Each entity must have won for itself the right to become divine through self-experience. The physical evolves gradually from the spiritual, mental, and psychic. No one has ever reached adeptship in one life, it is said, but each man has within himself the spark of an adept and can evolve into one through self-induced and self-devised methods, aided by the masters of wisdom to the extent allowed by karma and our own efforts. So that concludes the review of the three fundamental propositions. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts on those? Okay, then we'll continue on. If a thought or a question comes up on one of those later, that's fine. We'll have a period of question and answer after the talk. But next is a devotional reading from the Bhagavad Gita from chapter 7, Devotion by Means of Spiritual Discernment. Krishna is speaking. Hear, O son of Pritha, how with heart fixed on me, practicing meditation, in taking me as thy refuge, thou shalt know me completely. I will instruct thee fully in this knowledge and in its realization, which having learned, there remains nothing else to be known. Among thousands of mortals, a single one perhaps strives for perfection, and among those so striving, perhaps a single one knows me as I am. Earth, water, fire, air, and akasha, manas, buddhi, and ahankara is the eightfold division of my nature. It is inferior. Know that my superior nature is different and is the knower. By it, the universe is sustained. Learn that the whole of creation springs from this too, as from a womb. I am the cause, I am the production and the dissolution of the whole universe. There is none superior to me, O conqueror of wealth, and all things hang on me as precious gems upon a string. I am the taste and water, O son of Kunti, the light in the sun and the moon, the mystic syllable Om in all the Vedas, sound in space, the masculine essence in men, the sweet smell in the earth, and the brightness in the fire. In all creatures I am the life, and the power of concentration in those whose minds are on the spirit. Know me, O son of Pritha, as the eternal seed of all creatures. I am the wisdom of the wise and the strength of the strong. And I am the power of the strong who in action are free from desire and longing. In all creatures, I am desire regulated by moral fitness. Know also that the dispositions arising from the three qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are from me. They are in me, but I am not in them. The whole world, being deluded by these dispositions, which are born of the three qualities, knoweth not me distinct from them, supreme, imperishable. For this, my divine elusive power, acting through the natural qualities, is difficult to surmount, and those only can surmount it who have recourse to me alone. The wicked among men, the deluded and the low-minded, deprived of spiritual perception by this illusion, and inclining towards demonical dispositions, do not have recourse to me. And that, again, was Krishna speaking as the higher self in the Bhagavad Gita. And now we will have the talk on Paracelsus.
Okay, let me share my slides first. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, friends, and welcome to our short talk on the philosophy of Paracelsus. So in the introduction of the Secret Doctrine, H.P. Blavatsky makes this statement. Here's what she says. The public must be made acquainted with the efforts of many world adepts, of initiated poets, writers, and classics of every age, to preserve in the records of humanity the knowledge of the existence, at least of such a philosophy, if not actually of its tenets. The initiates of 1888, and here she implies initiates who started the Theosophical movement in the late 19th century, would indeed remain incomprehensible and ever seemingly impossible myth, were not, like initiates, shown to have lived in every other age of history. And here what HPB is saying is that even though the launching of the Theosophical movement at the end of the 19th century was considered as a giving out of the teachings, prior to that, in every century, there were high initiates or learned individuals who kept the flame burning till someone came across. And so today we will touch upon the life and philosophy of one such initiate, who is Paracelsus. So the great initiate referred to as Paracelsus was born Philppus, Aureolus, Theophrastus, Bombast of Hohenheim. He was born on November 26th in the year 1493 near Maria Einstein, a village about 2 hours from the city of Zurich in Switzerland. His father, William Bombast, was relative of the Grand Master of the Order of the Knights of St. John of those times, and whose name was George Bombast. So William worked as a physician, and in the year 1492, he married the matron of hospital, Elsa, and they had one son, Theophrastus, the only child. So we are taught that Paracelsus, in consideration of the place of his birth, was also referred to as Germanus, Suevus, and Arpinus. So that he assumed the name of Paracelsus, but in different writings, he also had other names through which he was referred to. So during his early years, Paracelsus was taught various branches of sciences by his father, who instructed him in the rudiments of alchemy, surgery, and medicine. And Paracelsus always honored the memory of his father and always spoke about him in the kindest of terms, because he considered him not only his father, but also his friend and instructor. And following his earlier years, Paracelsus continued his studies under the instruction of the monks of the convent of St. Andrew, which was situated in the valley of Savoine, under the guidance of the learned bishops Baumgartner and Schitt of Rodgach. He was only 15 years old at that point, and at 16 years he was sent to study at the University of Basel. He was later instructed by the celebrated Johann Trithermus of Spanheim, abbot of St. Jacob at Würzburg, and who was considered as one of the greatest adepts of magic, alchemy, and astrology. And it was under this teacher that his inner proclivity toward the study of occultism was brought to fruition and into practice. His love for occult sciences led him to enter the laboratory of Sigismund Frugger at Schwarz in Trial, who, like the previous abbot, was also a celebrated alchemist and able to impart many secrets in occultism. And following these studies, Paracelsus traveled extensively throughout Europe, Russia, and several regions in Asia. He visited Germany, Italy, France, the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, and Russia, and it is said that he even went to India because he was taken prisoner by the Tatars and was brought to the Khan, whose son he afterwards accompanied to Constantinople. And it's become quite obvious that the works of Paracelsus are very similar to the teachings of the Eastern Adepts, in many ways almost identical. And so it's safe to assume that during his imprisonment in captivity in Tartary, he was actually instructed in the secret doctrine by these teachers. The philosophy imparted by Paracelsus in regard to the sevenfold principles of man, the qualities of the astral body, the earth-bound elementaries, etc., was at that point in time known and entirely unknown to the West. But this information is almost identical to that taught in Isis Unveiled and Esoteric Buddhism, another book recently published by Theosophical Lodge. Excuse me. However, in his description of the elementals, he substituted many Eastern terms, such as they were so that they're more in harmony with the German mythological conceptions. And in other words, he took several of these ancient words and came up with his own description that kind of matched the local language. Most likely, Paracelsus studied among the Tatars between 1513 and 1521, and because according to von Helmut's account, he came to Constantinople during the latter year and received what's called the allegorical philosopher's stone. In other words, initiation. We are taught that the adept from whom Paracelsus received the stone, according to a certain Aureolus, was referred to as Solomon Trismonius, a countryman of Paracelsus. And it was said that Trismonius was also in possession of what's called a universal panacea, in other words, someone who's initiated into the high doctrine, and it is asserted that he had been seen still alive at the end of the 17th century. So later, Paracelsus traveled through many countries along the Danube. In Italy, he served as an army surgeon in the imperial army and was part of many war situations of those times. During these battlefield events, he collected a vast amount of knowledge, not only from physicians, surgeons, and alchemists, but also by discussions with barbers, shepherds, Jews, gypsies, and a bunch of individuals who didn't receive formal education. He made it a point to learn from the high and the low, from the learned and from those who were not lettered, and it was nothing unusual to see him in the company of teamsters and vagabonds on highways and at public inns, and this was greatly frowned upon by his peers. And so Paracelsus had this unique quality, and sometimes referred to in the Gita as well. He was equal-minded towards every individual, and he seemed to realize that there's always something to learn by someone, whether they have an education or not. And having traveled for 10 years, sometimes exercising his part as a physician, other times teaching or studying alchemy and magic, according to the custom of those days, he returned at the age of 32 again to Germany, where he soon became a celebrated physician because of the many and wonderful cures he performed. In 1525, Paracelsus went to Basel, and in 1527, on the recommendation, he was appointed by the city council as a professor of physics, medicine, and surgery, and was at that time receiving a pretty good salary. However, his lectures were not, like most of his colleagues, mere repetitions of the opinions of Hippocrates and other prior scientists, and the exposition of which was formed the sole occupation of professors of medicine of those times. He took it a step further. His doctrines were essentially founded upon the knowledge he was initiated into, and he taught them independently of the opinions of others, gaining thereby the applause of his students and absolutely horrifying his orthodox colleagues by his contravention of the established custom of teaching nothing but that could be well supported by old and accepted authorities, regardless of whether or not the teaching was grounded in reason or truth. And so he is basically breaking the norms by bringing in higher knowledge into the realm of medicine. At the same time, he was also appointed to the position of the city physician, and in that capacity, he tabled a resolution to the city council of Basel that would direct the dispensaries to come under his supervision, and that would then permit him to examine whether or not the compounders of medicines understood the science in the first place, and then to determine whether they had sufficient quantity of pure and genuine drugs on hand, so that they may be prevented from asking exorbitant prices for the medicine. Obviously, the establishment did not quite like that, and so as a result of this action, Paracelsus drew upon himself the backlash of all the pharmacists and apothecaries. Further, other physicians and professors who were envious of his success in teaching medicine and curing diseases also joined forces in his persecution. They went on to claim that his appointment as a professor at the university had been made without their consent, and that Paracelsus was essentially a stranger, a charlatan, and who nobody knew where he came from. And furthermore, they claimed that they did not know that he was even a real physician. Additionally, Paracelsus had a fallout with the members of the city council, and in the end, he was forced to quickly leave Basel and secretly sometime in 1528. Soon, Paracelsus resumed his wandering life, roaming as he did in his youth over the country, essentially traveling in villages and living in taverns and inns. He had many followers, many disciples followed him. They were either attracted by a sincere desire for medical and occult knowledge, or by a wish to acquire that art so that they can selfishly use it for their own purposes. The most renowned of his followers was Johannes Arpinus, who for 3 years served as a secretary, and who afterwards became a professor of Greek language and a well-known publisher, bookseller, and a printer at Basel. Now, Paracelsus, being an occultist, was also very reticent in regard to secrets. And so many of his students spoke very bitterly against him on that account. And in fact, he gave them pretty much only what they could understand. But after the death of Paracelsus, many of them regretted speaking out against him. Paracelsus traveled to Colmar in 1528 and arrived at Esslingen and Nuremberg between 1529 and 1530. He had barely resumed his practice when the doctors of Nuremberg quickly denounced him as a quack, charlatan, and an impostor. And so to disprove their accusations, he directed the city council to place some of the patients who had been declared incurable under his care. And so they sent him cases such as those of elephantiasis, and when he cured them in a short time and without asking for any fee. Several testimonials of his amazing cures can be found in the archives of the city of Nuremberg. But despite his success, Paracelsus appeared destined to a life of continued wanderings. And so in 1530, we find him in Nordengland, Munich, Regensburg, Hamburg, and Meran. And in 1531 in St. Gall, and then 1535 in Zurich. And he was wandering around because wherever he tried to settle, he was pushed out by the established physicians and compounders. He then went to Meran and finally at Salzburg, where he was invited by Prince Palatine, the Duke Ernst of Bavaria, who greatly revered the secret arts. And it was in this place that Paracelsus finally obtained the fruits of his long travels and labors that brought him such a widespread fame. However, he was not destined to fully enjoy his long rest. And on 24th of September 1541, he died after a short sickness at the age of 48 in a small room in a small inn called the White Horse. The cause of death is still a mystery, but it's quite obvious that, like many other initiates before him, such as Pythagoras, and after him, like H.P. Blavatsky, extensive traveling was an integral part of the initiation process. And during his lifetime, he wrote in excess of 100 books. So we will now consider some of his fundamental teachings. And Mr. W. Judge, in one of his articles published in the Path in 1887, said this. He said, Paracelsus was one of the greatest masters ever known upon earth. In rank, he may be compared to Hermes Thrice-Master. It is considered by some students to be likely that this period, that's the current period when the Theosophical movement was launched, it was once known as Paracelsus in a body whose astral meets with others in Asia. And we see this referred quite frequently when describing Paracelsus as an initiate who essentially casts aside his mortal frame and is living in his astral form among the adepts of the East. He openly taught the sevenfold constitution of man. And here I would like to point out that Paracelsus put his own terminology out. And so he referred to the physical body as the elementary body, which in Sanskrit is Sthula Sharira. The vital force, the life force, which is known as prana, he called it archeus. He referred to the astral body as the sidereal body, which is in Sanskrit known as linga sharira. He referred to the animal soul, the kamarupa, as mumya. The human soul, the flesh of Adam, or manas, as the rational soul. The spiritual soul as spiritual soul, which is also known as buddhi, or flesh of Christ. And then he referred to the higher triad, the Atma, Buddhi, Manas, as a man of the new Olympus. So he kind of came up with his own terms, and he's trying to match the terminology with the local language so it's better understood. So in his Philosophia Psychics and his explanations of astronomia, Paracelsus writes extensively about the description and explanation of the seven principles. And here's what he states, that the life of man is an astral effluvium or a balsamic impression, a heavenly and invisible fire, an enclosed essence or spirit. We have no better terms to describe it. The death of a man is nothing else but the end of his daily labor, or taking away the ether of life, a disappearance of vital balsam, an extinction of the natural light, re-entering into the matrix of the mother. The natural man possesses the elements of the earth, and the earth is his mother, and he re-enters into her and loses his natural flesh, but the real man will be reborn at the day of the resurrection in other spiritual and glorified body. But the divine, immortal, and invisible man cannot be a subject to the investigations of any physical science, which deals merely with external and visible things. He can be known to no one except to his own self. For the law cannot comprehend the high, or the low cannot comprehend the high, and the finite mind cannot contain the infinite. The study of the divine man is the object of self-knowledge. Physical science deals with the physical, the metaphysical science with the astral man, but these sciences are misleading and incomplete if we lose out of sight the existence of the divine and the eternal man. Neither the external nor the astral man is the real man, but the real man is the spiritual soul in connection with the divine spirit. The astral is the shadow, the ethereal counterpart of the body, illuminated by the spirit, and therefore resembles man. It is neither material nor immaterial, but partakes of the nature of each. The inner, the sidereal man, or the astral form, is formed out of the same limbus as a macrocosm, and he is therefore able to participate in all the wisdom and knowledge existing in the latter. He may obtain knowledge of all the creatures, angels, and spirits, and learn to understand their attributes. He may learn from the microcosm the meaning of the symbols, the forms by which he is surrounded, in the same manner as he acquires a language of his parents. Because his own soul is the quintessence of everything in creation, and in connection sympathetically with the whole of nature. And therefore, every change that takes place in the microcosm can be sensed by the ethereal essence surrounding his spirit, and it may come to the consciousness and comprehension of man. And so, in relation to the sidereal or the astral body, Paracelsus says in his Philosophy Paracelsus, to speak of the evestrium in the mortal and immortal aspects, we may say that everything has evestrium that is like a shadow upon a wall. The evestrium comes into existence and grows with the body and remains with it as long as a particle of the matter composing the latter exists. The evestrium originates contemporaneously with the first birth of each form and everything. Whether it be visible or invisible, whether it belongs to the realm of matter or the realm of the soul, has its evestrium. But the Taramins means an invisible power that begins to be able to manifest itself at the time when the senses of the inner perception become developed. So in terms of dreams, Paracelsus taught that there are two kinds of dreams. The natural ones, such as those come from the spirit. It's unnecessary to say anything about the former because they are known to all. They may be caused by joy, sadness, by impurities of the blood, by external or internal causes. For example, a gambler may dream of cards, a soldier of battles, a robber of theft. All such dreams are caused by the lower principles of such persons, which play with their imagination and stimulate their fantasy. But there are supernatural dreams, and they are the messengers from God or the higher self that are sent to us at the approach of some danger. Ananias, Cornelius, and many others had similar visions, and such supernatural dreams can place sometimes even amongst the present generation, but only the wise pay attention to them. Others treat them with contempt, although such dreams are true and do not deceive. And he goes on to say that there are some persons whose nature is so spiritual that the souls are exalted, that they can approach the highest spiritual sphere at the times when the bodies are asleep. Such persons have seen the glory of God, the happiness of the redeemed, and the torture of the wicked. And they did not forget their dreams on waking, but remembered what they had seen unto the ends of the days. Such things are possible, Paracelsus says, and the greatest mysteries are thus laid open to the perception of the Spirit. And if we earnestly desire such gifts, and pray with an unrelenting faith to the power of the Supreme that rests in ourselves, to grant them to us, we may be enabled to see the Mysteria Dei deity and to understand them as well as Moses and John. And so when Paracelsus says that when men are asleep, their bodies are like those of animals or plants. For plants and animals have also the elementary and the sidereal bodies. But the divine spirit can only become active in man. During sleep, the sidereal or the astral body, by which man is connected with the inner nature of the macrocosm, becomes free in its movements, and it can then rise up to the sphere of his ancestors and converse with the stars, the higher thoughts. That is to say that the processes taking place in the intellectual sphere of the macrocosm will throw the reflections into his soul and come into his inner perception. Dreams, visions, and omens are gifts given to the sidereal man and not to the elementary or the physical body. Now, Paracelsus also coined a different term called pneumatology, and he referred to the pneuma, or the link between the spirit and the body, which is also known to us as antaskarana. Paracelsus taught that the noumena, or the soul, the lower soul, or the animal soul, means a semi-material spirit, an essence or form which is neither material in the common acceptation of the term nor or pure spirit. It's basically a combination of both. It is, like anything else in the universe, a form of will and may be with or without any intelligence. And usually, according to Paracelsus, means the connecting link between the spirit and the body. But there are beings who belong entirely to the realm of the soul and have no such bodies, as are commonly called material. And when man dies, the soul remains and its higher essences go to the form, the substance of the body of the paradisiacal man. And here he called it the man of the new Olympus, which is essentially the higher triad, the Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. And the lower essences of the soul, from which the spirit has departed, dissolve into astral elements to which they belong, as the earthly body dissolves in the elements of the earth. So Paracelsus points out that this dissolution, however, does not take place immediately at the time of the separation of the soul from the body, but may require a long time. That which constituted the mind of a man, which will continue to exist after the death of the body, although it itself is not man. And I quote, he says, "If man has been true during his life, his spirit will be true after man's death. If he has been a great astronomer, a magician, or alchemist, his spirit will still be the same. And we may learn many great things from such spirits, they being the substance of the mind which constituted the terrestrial man." He goes on to say that there are two deaths or two separations: the separation of the spirit and soul from the body, and the separation of the spirit from the astral soul. Or to express it more correctly, of the spiritual soul from the merely intellectual and animal soul. If a person dies a natural death, that is, from old age, his passions having died out during his life, his selfish will become weak and his mind will act like that of a child, putting its confidence in his Father, his spirit and soul will, at the time of his death, become free from material bonds and be attracted to the body of Christ, which again is the higher triad. Such a soul is herself the flesh and blood of Christ, Paracelsus says, and Christ is her master. She does not enter into communication with mortals because she has no desire from anything earthly. She does not, quote unquote, think in the common sense of the term or speculate about terrestrial things, nor worry herself about her relatives or friends. She lives in a state of pure bliss, feeling, and enjoyment, and that is known in Theosophy as Devachan. Let's discuss a few points of magic and sorcery that Paracelsus taught about. So he first and foremost, he drew a clear distinction between magic and sorcery. And here's what he said. Magic and sorcery are two entirely different things. And there is as much difference between them as there is between light and darkness, between white and black. Magic is the greatest wisdom than knowledge of supernatural powers. A knowledge of spiritual things cannot be obtained by merely reasoning logically from external appearances existing on the physical plane, but it will be acquired by obtaining more spirituality, making oneself capable to feel and see the things of the spirit. It would be well if a clergyman who are called spiritual guides would know more of spiritual things than what they have read in the books, and if they had some practical experience of divine wisdom instead of merely repeating the opinions of others people believe to be divine. And he goes on to say that man is essentially a visible and an invisible workshop. The visible one is his body, the invisible one is imagination, higher mind. He says that the sun gives light, and this light is not tangible, but its heat may be felt, and its rays are concentrated. The imagination is a sun in the soul of man, acting in its own sphere, as the sun of the earth acts that on the earth. Wherever the sun shines, germs planted in soil will grow and vegetation come up. And the sun of the soul acts in a similar manner and calls the forms of soul into existence. He says that imagination is like the sun. The sun has a light, again, which is not tangible, but man is mind. He is what he thinks. If he thinks fire, he is on fire. If he thinks war, then there'll be cause of war. It depends merely on that the whole of his imagination comes from the entire sun. That is, wholly imagines what he wills. Let's wind up by talking about his view on medicine and the role of the physician in curing diseases. And so in terms of so-called modern medicine contemporaneous with his time, here's what Paracelsus said. Here's what he said to physicians of his time. He said, "You have entirely deserted the path indicated by nature and built up an artificial system which is fit for nothing but to swindle the public and to prey upon the pockets of the sick. Your safety is due to the fact that your gibberish is unintelligible to the public, who fancy that it must have some meaning, and consequence is to no one come near you without being cheated. He tells of them that you live impostor, and the aid and abetment of the legal profession enables you to carry your impostures to evade punishment of the law. You poison the people and ruin their health. You are sworn to use diligence in your art, but how could you do so as you possess no art, and all your boasted science is nothing but an invention to cheat and deceive?" And here's what he says, that the virtues of a physician as follows. The greatest and the highest of all qualifications of a physician who should possess is sapientia, or higher wisdom. And without this qualification, all his learning will amount to little or nothing as far as any benefit or usefulness to humanity is concerned. He alone is in possession of wisdom, who is in possession of reason, knows how to use it without error or doubt. The book of wisdom is a recognition of the truth, and the truth is God. For he who has caused all things come into existence, and who himself, the eternal fountain of all things, is also the source of all wisdom. And he goes on to say that the physician should exercise his art not for his own benefit, but for the sake of the patient. If he practices merely for his own benefit, such a physician resembles a wolf, and is even worse than an ordinary murderer. For while a man may defend himself against murderous attack made from him on the high road, he by no means of defense against the murderer who, under the guise of a benefactor and protected by law, comes to steal his goods and destroy his life. A physician, above all, should be honest and true. Let his speech be yes or no. Let him avoid such subterfuges and prevarications. God acts through him who is upright, honest, and pure, but not through him who is wicked and false. He says God is absolute truth, and his power does not become manifest in those who are not true. The power of the physician should be resting in the truth. If it rests upon lies, it will be useless and belongs to the devil. If man were made only out of one kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, then it would be sufficient for him to lead a holy life and to enable him to cure all diseases in himself and in others. Because he says that it's made of three worlds, and it is necessary that the physician should also have knowledge of the conditions existing in those two other worlds, the world of the mind and the external nature. So finally, we'll just round up by kind of touching upon what Paracelsus called as the four pillars of medicine. And he says they are philosophy, that is knowledge of physical nature; astronomy, a knowledge of the powers of the mind; alchemy, a knowledge of the divine powers in man; and personal virtue, the holiness of the physician. The physician, he says, should be a philosopher who is acquainted with the knowledge of external nature. The physician, that is to say, he must dare to use his own reason, not to cling to opinions and book authorities, be they old or new. He must, above all, be in the possession of that faculty which is called intuition, and which cannot be acquired by blindly following the footsteps of another, and he must see his own way. There are natural philosophers, there are artificial philosophers. If you wish to be a true physician, you must be able to do your own thinking and not merely employ the thoughts of others. What others may teach you may be good enough to assist you in search of your knowledge, but you must be able to think for yourself and not merely cling to the coattail of any authority. Second, the physician must be an astronomer, and this means that he should know the heaven, which is the mental sphere where man lives, and all his stars, ideas, and constellations. And I quote what Paracelsus says: the physician must be an astronomer, for he ought to know the influences of the seasons, of heat and cold, of dryness and moisture, of light and darkness upon the organism of man. There is a time for everything, and what may be good at one time may be evil at another. Man's body is a product of mind, and its condition depends to a great extent on the state of his mind. All his diseases, insofar as they are not directly due to external mechanical causes, are due to mental conditions. Philosophy deals with the visible material of man's constitution, but there is a vastly greater part of man which is ethereal and invisible. And he goes on to say that, as we taught in Theosophy, that the seeds of diseases are in the astral body or astral sphere of man. Thirdly, Paracelsus says that the physician ought to be an alchemist. That's to say that he ought to be regenerated in the spirit of Jesus Christ or the higher self and know his divine powers. And here's what Paracelsus says, that he should be an alchemist. That is, he should understand the chemistry of life. Medicine is not merely a science but an art. It does not consist merely in compounding pills and plasters and drugs of all kinds, but it deals with the processes of life which must be understood before they can be guided. And finally, the fourth qualification of physician, he says, it must be holiness must be an integral part of the physician. He who can cure disease is a physician. To cure diseases is an art which cannot be acquired by merely reading books, but which must be learned by experience. Neither emperors nor popes, nor colleges nor high schools can create physicians. They can confer certain privileges and talk about the physical body, but they cannot really give him the knowledge that is knowledge of the higher self. And we can wind up the talk by this famous quote from Paracelsus, who says that a physician who is true to his own higher self will also have faith in himself, and he who has that faith will easily command the faith of the people. And so a preacher who utters moral sermons does not observe his own doctrines will not command respect. And finally, says that a physician who deserves the confidence of the people will be trusted by God, and for the Spirit of God is that guides the paths of mankind. And so with that brief overview of Paracelsus, we'll wind up and open up the floor for any questions, contributions. Yes, Herb?
Yes, so Paracelsus was initiated the 1500s. He's a long string of outstanding people that we have the potential to become after lifetimes of effort. And he talked very similarly to Neoplatonists, and Robert Crosby had an article on religion, and it sounds like that's a continuation of his work. So he was a physician of Paracelsus was. So this is a continuation of opportunities, if you will, people who take advantage of the opportunities, while the embodied, you talked about while the unembodied too. So it's a continuous growth for all of us, I guess, even in Paracelsus.
Yes. Absolutely. I think one thing about Paracelsus that really stood out in the students' reading was that he, as you said, he learned from a Platonist, Neoplatonist. He learned from the Eastern Adepts, and he had his willingness to talk to anyone, to learn. His approach was that every ego, every individual has something to contribute to the common good, to the common good and to the higher knowledge. And he was equal-minded to all. He was equal-minded to the most learned, most educated, as well as to those who least education. And something that really stands out in some of the books that have been compiled on him is that you could see him having a discourse in a university, in a church, or you could see him having a discourse in an inn, in a rural area, sitting on a bench with people with no education. And he took copious notes. He just didn't talk to them. He wanted to see what people thought. What are the view of life? What are the cause of sufferings? And sometimes when you read some of that, you also you kind of there's a parallels to Buddha as well, right? When Buddha became enlightened, he just didn't go to a temple or preach. He was wandering through villages, through deep poverty, to talking to laborers, to educated priests. In many ways, Paracelsus really had that wonderful attitude, and he never looked down upon anyone. But he was also fearless. He would challenge the status quo openly. He challenged the practice of so-called modern medicine in the 16th to 15th centuries, and he proved, he took medicine beyond just the physical. He pointed out that many of these folks were cheating patients and not curing diseases. He could cure some really dreadful diseases, and received, all he got was backlash, and he had to get out of towns. He'd go into a town, try to settle in there as a practicing physician, and he would get a backlash about those who were envious of him, and he'd go to the next town. So but that's a life he always had. He wanted a lot. He learned a lot. And in many ways, the opening statement that H.P. Blavatsky talks about, that during every age, in every century, you do have these initiates. In most cases, they're there just to teach to a few elect, but they're there to keep the flame burning. And what HPB says that the success of the Theosophical movement in the late 19th century would not have been possible if it had not been for people like Paracelsus, like Count Saint Germain, and a whole row line of initiates all the way back to prior to Christ.
Mhm.
Many poets, many philosophers, So,
It's up to us to carry them
Yeah.
on however we can do it.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So we have a couple of minutes. Any more? Any feedback? Any contributions from you?
That was a great talk. So interesting. He really seemed like he was functioning on multiple levels all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you could tell from his writings that he was looking at the man ego as a whole sevenfold individual. And in order to do that, he had, to his disciples, to his inner circle, he could impart some of the higher knowledge he was initiated into. To those who didn't understand occultism, he kind of was a bridge in many ways. And he also did his best to again continually challenge the status quo prevalent in that time. And he was trying to be a bridge as well. A lot of what we are taught in theosophy, are grounded in many, like in Sanskrit and Eastern languages. But what he did was, to make it more acceptable, he tried to come up with his own terminology. And there's a whole list of the terms he used. He called, for example, he referred to the life which he called prana as mumia, because in those days that was better understood. And he referred to the essence of life, which is called vitality, but he called mumia, and he says parts of human, animal, vegetable bodies, if separated from organism, retain the vital power. And that was kind of more, he found, and he found this media as a little more easier to bridge to the local language that was spoken in those days. And so it's really important to really understand Paracelsus. And this student did his best to try to stick to the definitions he gave out. But you can see that in essence, what he was imparting is theosophy. Taught through the ages, starting from Plato, Pythagoras, Constance Saint-Germain, Paracelsus, and H.P. Blavatsky. And in many ways, you can see a parallel, right? Many ways, the theosophical movement through HPB and the messengers was a bridge between the East and the West, right? To bring theosophy to, and then take it back to the East as well, because in those days, India was also kind of, in losing its original essence, right? Paracelsus had a very, very similar approach, is to bring that knowledge to the people of those times.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it's a very, very well done thought. Thank you.
It's only scratching the surface. I mean, if you look at his teachings, it's like going through the whole secret doctrine. You can only do so much in 45 minutes, but it's something worthy of the read. Because if you Google Paracelsus, I mean, he's more. If the Wikipedia only gives a very exoteric and misguided explanation of Paracelsus, but he's this. You could tell he's an initiate that and he really he kept the light of theosophy burning like the previous during the Middle times in Middle Ages.
Any other thoughts, comments? Okay, I guess we'll stop recording and end the meeting, and we'll take a 10-minute break or 5 to 10-minute break and come back. The same Google Meet to finish up Patanjali's yoga aphorisms. So we hope you all can join us.
Sounds good. Thank you.
See you in a bit.
Okay.